right? We've got check-in Friday night, 4 to 6 p.m. That will be at the lodge at Greenbow Lake State Resort Park. And we'll do a little meet and greet at the lodge from 7 to 8 p.m. And so that's really just going to be kind of, you know, probably dinner basically in the dining room. So after people have checked in, the meet and greet, we'll just have a table set aside, like a big table set aside down in the dining room. And it'll be, you know, come get a bite to eat or just say hello if you're not wanting to dine at the dining room, whatever. But so that'll be at the dining room at the lodge, and just look for us down there. And then if you can't make check-in from 4 to 6, I'll be back and check-in will just be right there in the lobby as you come into the lodge. There'll be some signage up. So after meet and greet, after dinner, I'll be back up at the late check-in table from 8 to 9 p.m. If you can't make check-in Friday night, then you'll just check in Saturday morning, and that'll be fine. So Saturday morning we'll be at the amphitheater, and that's where the race will start and finish, is the amphitheater, which is southwest of the lodge, basically. So before you get to the lodge, there's a turnoff for the amphitheater, and there's signage for all this too. I'll pull up the park map in a minute too and show you where all of this is. You'll see that I've added the USARA waiver to the schedule page. So when you check in, if you'll print that waiver out and fill it out and have that with you, that'll expedite check-in. I'll have a few of those extra, so if you don't have a way to print it out, that's okay. But if you do, it's going to make your check-in process a little bit quicker if you just go ahead and print that out, fill it out, bring it with you. So then, yeah, late check-in Saturday morning, we'll be at the amphitheater. We'll be giving out maps at 7 a.m. at the amphitheater, and I'll have a short briefing at 7 a.m. when I give out maps. And then I'll have another short briefing, even shorter briefing at about 8:45. The race will start at 9. So at about 8:45, we'll do another short little briefing to answer any questions that maybe came up while you were working on your maps, that sort of thing. So the maps that you get at 7 a.m. will be you'll get 2 maps. You'll get the state park map, the trail map, which any of you can go find on the state park website. And then you'll also get a single 8.5 by 11 topo map. Every racer will receive a copy of the topo map. So everyone will have her own map. And the map that you get will have plotted on it all of the prime points and some of the bonus points. So every point except for 6 of them. So how the race is going to be scored is this. You'll be scored according to the number of prime points that you got, and then the number of bonus points that you got, and then time. So there are no mandatory points at all in the race. So you can kind of think of prime points like you might have thought of mandatory points before. I've called them prime points just to distinguish them and to say they're not mandatory. If you don't get a prime point, you're not disqualified, you're not unofficial, you're not any of those things. It's just that I'm going to rank you. Those are going to be prime in terms of your ranking. So that's why I'm calling them that, so that there's not this notion that you have to get those. So you'll be ranked according to prime points, then bonus points, and then time. So for example, let's say, and I can't remember how many of everything there is, but let's say there were 12 prime points and 6 bonus points, and your team goes out and gets all 12 prime points, but only 1 bonus point. So you've got 13 points overall. You're still going to place ahead of a team that gets 11 prime points and all 6 bonus points. They've got 17 points, but they only got 11 prime, and you got 12 prime. So there's definitely a premium, which is why I'm calling them prime points, to getting all of those. But again, they're not mandatory in the sense that you're not going to be disqualified if you don't find them all. So that being said, all of the prime points, the navigation is going to be very straightforward to those. And so, you know, if this is your first race and your goal is to go out and have fun and just finish, then a great goal for your team would be to go out and get all of the prizes. And that would be a fine goal. So yeah, so that's how the scoring is going to go. Any questions about that? Feel free to raise a hand. So the maps that you get will have everything except 6 of the bonus points plotted on them already. And you will not be getting those, what you need to find those points when you get your maps. So in other words, when you get your maps, you're not going to be plotting anything. All you're going to have to do is figure out your course to the points that you've got on your map. The points that are not on that map that are going to be available to you are 6 bonus points. 3 of those 6 bonus points will be, you'll get a bearing and a distance when you get to one of the points plotted on your map. So there are 3 different prime points associated with those 3 different bonus points. So it's not like you go to one prime point and then you have all 3 of the bearing and distance points. It's you go to a prime point, there's a single bearing and distance to a bonus that's associated with that prime point. You go to another prime point, there's a single bearing and distance associated with a bonus point that's associated with that prime point. And in fact, you'll find in your directions that you only get credit for that bonus point, the bearing and distance bonus point, if you found the prime point immediately prior to it. So let's say that the prime point is 3 and the bonus point associated with that prime point is 3b, right? So when you get to checkpoint 3, there's a bearing and distance that gets you to 3b. In order to get credit for 3b, you must get them in order. So you have to go to 3 and then go to 3b. And the main reason for that is because you may well see other teams going to one of the bonus points and you go, oh, must be a bonus point over there, even though it's not on my map. And even though I haven't gotten to the point I need to get that bearing and distance, I'm seeing a lot of teams go over there. So I'm just going to go straight to there, right? So you must go to the prime point first and check in at that one first before you get the bonus point. And the way I know you've done that is because we've got electronic punching for this race. So unlike races where you go and you have a little pin punch, and so I don't really know when you've been there and don't really know what order you've done things in, this race is going to have electronic punching like we use in orienteering. So you'll have a little dibber, a little e-punch, we call it, that you'll have to carry with you. Each team will get one of those. And so when you get to the checkpoint, there'll be a little electronic unit, a little box, and you put your dibber in that little box and it goes beep, and that records what time you were there. And so that way, when you're done, we'll have a list of all of your splits. We'll know what order you did everything in and how long it took you between each of those points. And it means that if you didn't go to 3 before you went to 3B, you won't get credit for 3B. So those are 3 of the bonus points that involve bearing and distance. Then there are 3 other bonus points that will involve plotting UTM coordinates. And for those, you will get to one prime point where you will have all 3 of those UTM coordinate checkpoints. You'll go visit all 3 of those from that single prime point. And I will tell you that that prime point is a bike point. So you'll be biking to that prime point, and then you have to drop your bikes there and go on foot to the 3 bonus points if you want to. You don't have to go to all 3 of them. You can go to one of them or 2 of them or all 3 of them, but you have to go to those on foot. And so you will see that I have updated this gear list. And one of the things you'll see here on the mandatory gear list now is a bike lock sufficient to lock all 3 of your bikes together. And that is because of that prime point. So when you drop your bikes at that prime point to go out and get those bonus points on foot, I want you to lock all 3 of your bikes together so that I don't have to have a volunteer sitting out there for hours just to keep an eye on your bikes. Basically, it's a fairly remote place, which is part of the reason I don't want to volunteer to have to, trek out there and be out there all afternoon. It's fairly remote, but it's a place where people can hike through. And so I don't want you leaving your bikes there unsecured. So just a lock that you can lock all three of your bikes together while you're out on the foot leg finding those 3 bonus points. So that's on your mandatory gear list. So be sure that you've got a cable lock or whatever to lock all of your bikes together. So those are and you'll see this was added a few weeks ago, a 1 to 24,000 plotter. So again, that's for those same 3 bonus points. And then a marker, whatever you use to draw on your map, so that you can plot those, because you'll be doing that out in the field. So you'll need to be sure that you take your plotter and your marker with you out in the field. So those are the maps that you're going to get 7 a.m. We'll do a little bit of a briefing, and you'll be working out your race strategy. Race starts at 9 a.m. Race finishes at 5 p.m. Food will be there. So we'll be doing a picnic style dinner at the amphitheater. We'll have grilled chicken sandwiches and then also veggie burgers. So that will be, we'll have food starting at 5 p.m. and then awards starting at 6 p.m. So that is schedule, that's gear list. I'm going to stop share and ask if there are any questions just yet.
I had a question about the bike helmets. It says CPSC helmets. I mean, is there a certain, like I looked at my helmet, I mean, I got it at a bike store and it said certified by Consumer Safety something or another. Is that sufficient?
Yeah. I mean, if it's a standard bike helmet that you bought at a bike shop and it's designed for biking, then it's going to be certified. It's fine. The main thing is what people started to use a lot in AR were helmets that were these sort of multidisciplinary helmets. Kong made one that was really popular that was supposed to be for biking and climbing and paddling, did all these different things. And it's sort of like, any jack of all trades, master of none. The concern was it's not really sufficient for biking, especially with, less of a concern with mountain biking. But yeah, so that was the main thing, is if you've got a proper biking helmet, then it's going to be fine. We don't want you wearing a paddling helmet or a climbing helmet on your mountain bike. That's it.
So if you, Stephanie, it's Deborah.
Yeah.
If I don't have a plotter, is that going to be an issue? I just should ask one of my team members.
I am certain that one of your team members will have a plotter, but I will also have a couple of plotters at that point.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm going to review how to plot UTMs in a minute.
Stephanie,
Yeah.
one quick question. Does your entire team need to be there for check-in?
No.
So you can just have like the team captain or like one person come pick up all the stuff?
Yeah, that's fine, as long as you've got everybody's waivers.
Okay.
You do need to have everybody's USARA waivers. If you don't have a USARA waiver for a teammate, you can still check in, but I'm not going to give you their bag until I have their USARA waiver.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yeah. So when you get to the point where you'll be plotting UTMs, there are going to be a few things there. There are going to be a couple of spare plotters. So if you lost yours, a plotter's on the gear list if you want to plot those points, but it's fine. If you don't have a plotter, I'm not going to like ding you on a mandatory gear list violation for not having a plotter. And the reason is I'm going to have plotters there that you can borrow. And I'm also going to have a little sheet that shows you how to plot UTMs. It'll be laminated in there at that point. So, I don't want this to be something that you like freak out about, like, what if we forget, what if we get it wrong, whatever, because we're going to review that here in a minute. And then you're also going to have this little sheet that shows you visually how to plot a point. So the whole point of this is to make it a learning experience, right? I'm not trying to test whether or not you all can plot UTM coordinates. I'm trying to help you learn how to plot UTM coordinates. So That's the whole point of this. If you know how and you're really proficient at it, then you know, you're going to be quicker. And so that's really good reason to practice and all of those things. But if you don't, then this is going to be a great way for you to learn. So that's why we're doing it, and why you don't need to be scared about it. So any other questions before I get to those two topics, which are going to be how to plot UTM coordinates, and then I've got kind of a little trick for you about how to navigate using the bearing and distance.
I have one other question. Is there cell phone service at the park?
Yeah, it's actually got pretty good cell phone service.
Okay, because I'm coordinating with my teammates right now, and so I'm figuring out if we can just kind of text each other, call each other. But there's cell phone service. Awesome.
Yeah. Yep. Anything else? Anybody? Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk first about plotting UTM coordinates. And the first thing I'm going to do is let's pull up our Greenbow base map. Okay, so this is roughly what your map will look like that you get. Let me zoom in a little bit of Greenbow Lake. This is a little bit different, but these black dotted trails on the maps you get are going to be more like a dashed line. And there'll be a legend that tells you that this gray is gravel, an improved road, the black is pavement. So these little black dotted are multi-use trails. And then this red dashed are bridle trails that you cannot have your bike on. So you can have your bike on these trails here. You cannot have your bike on this, but you'll have no reason to want to anyway. So this is roughly what your maps are going to look like. And you'll see these blue lines. These are UTM lines. And these are UTM coordinates. And all UTM coordinates and lines are a grid system that covers the entire globe. And it's an alternative to the latitude and longitude system. And the reason that it's superior to latitude and longitude for purposes of navigation is because this is a system that's based on distance, and it's a fixed distance between each of these lines. So between each of these points, so can you all see my little, there we go, there's the little hand is better. Between this point right here, this axis where these two UTM lines cross, from there over to the next one, so if I'm traveling east, is 1 kilometer. And same thing north to south, 1 kilometer. So that's a 1 kilometer grid square. And so it immediately tells me if my UTM coordinate is 0.333,000, and the point I'm going to is happens to be at coordinate 0.334,000, then that tells me if I went straight from this point to this point, I would be traveling 1 kilometer, right? Because it's 1 kilometer from here to here. And so when you understand that this is simply a distance, that this is a 1 kilometer grid squares, then you start to understand that plotting UTM points, what you're doing when you put your plotter on here and plot a point, all this plotter is doing is breaking down that grid square into smaller units. So I've got, this is a 1 to 24,000 map. The maps that you get will be 1 to 24,000. And so this plotting tool that I use is simply taking this larger 1 kilometer square and it's breaking it down into smaller units. And so I've got 10, of these main numbered lines, right? And this is a 1 kilometer grid square. So what that tells me, 1 kilometer is 1,000 meters, right? So what that tells me is that each one of these numbered lines, the big major lines here, is 100 meters, right? Because I've got 10 of them, and this is 1,000 meters. So that's 100 meters. And within each one of those numbered big main lines, you'll see there are 10 little hash marks. So there's one at the halfway point. So if you're going from 2 to 3, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is the midway, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if that's 100 meters, then that tells me each one of those little individual tick marks is 10 meters, right? So this is a plotting tool that is taking a 1 kilometer grid square and breaking it down into 10-meter increments. And so when I plot a UTM coordinate, which is what this is right here, the numbers that the race director is giving me are going to match the numbers on this coordinate system along the edge of my map. And what I've got to do is figure out where within the grid square that particular point is. And so, for example, we always start with an easting. So this is a little bit counterintuitive because it's the lines that run north-south that are the easting lines. And the lines that run east-west are the northern lines. And the way that you can make that start to make sense is that if you're traveling this way, right, you're traveling east, you're crossing these lines. The north-south lines are the ones that you're going to cross as you travel east. And so your easting is the point along that imaginary line from west to east, right? So your easting, you're measuring using these numbers that run west, east, east, west along the bottom of the map. So that's your easting right there. These are your easting numbers. And then your northing are the lines that you're going to cross if you're traveling north on the map. So here's your northing right there. Right. So UTM coordinates always start by giving you the easting first. That's just a standard that makes sure. Now, if I gave them to you in reverse order on this particular map, you would figure it out, because what you've got to do is make these numbers match up with one of these numbers along this edge of the map, right? So you'd be able to figure out I gave them to you in the wrong order because those wouldn't match up, right? There are some areas where these numbers and these numbers, those first few, are the same. So that's why we have a convention that says we always give you the easting first and the northing second. So in this case, if we want to plot this point for a reentrant junction, we've got a slew of numbers, and the way I've given them to you, different race directors do this differently, and you just have to kind of figure out by comparing how many digits are in the number they give you to how many digits are on the edge of the map. In this case, you'll see that they're the same because I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 digits in your easting, and there are 7 digits in these eastings right here, right? So you don't have to drop numbers off. You don't have to add zeros, anything like that. The number matches perfectly the number of digits in the easting on the map. So we can see, and you'll see that they make kind of these middle two numbers bigger. So that helps you sort of identify what you're going to be using here. So we've got, if you look at those numbers, 34 and then 35, and you think of those as thousandths, right? Or you could say 4 and 5. 4,000 and then 5,000, right? Because those are 1 kilometer. So we're talking about 4,000 meters and 5,000 meters. What that means is these last 3 digits are going up to 999 meters, right? If I go to 1,000 meters, if I start at this point right here on this line at 0.334,000 at that line, and I travel for 999 meters due east, I'm going to stop just short of this next easting line. If I travel a full 1,000 meters, right? So I've gone from 4,000 to 5,000, then I'm on this next easting line, right? And so the important numbers for plotting points are these last 3, right? The last 3 numbers tell me where within that square, before I get to the next square, my point is going to be. So if the last 3 numbers are 190, what that means is 190 meters from that easting line. And so what the plotter does, the plotter simply helps me figure out where 190 out of 1,000 meters over that point is. So that's all the plotter is doing. The plotter is simply a little scale that helps me figure out 190 out of 1,000 is how far over within that square. And then I do the same thing with the northing. And by bringing those 2 together, I find where my point is. So I have to begin, the first thing I have to do is figure out which square I'm in. So to figure out which square I'm in, one way to make this easier as you review it. So I know now that my last 3 digits are the digits within a single grid square, right? This 190 is within grid square 0334 easting. And it's the same way going up. We've got 4263, 700. So 4263 is right here. 0334 is right here. So I know that the race director has given me UTM coordinates where the last 3 digits are the ones within the grid square. What comes before that help me locate the correct grid square. So what I'm going to do, just to help me not get these confused, I'm going to draw a thin little line right here, right down between the first 4 digits and the last 3 digits on my clue sheet. And so now, if my teammate is reading my clue sheet to me, my teammate's going to say, the grid square you want is 0334, and I'm going to go, ooh, okay, 0334, 4263. And I'm going, oh, 4263 up here. So, and you'll see the numbers are up here as well. So now I'm going to go up here just because I can see it better. So 0334, 4263. So what that tells me is that I am in this grid square right here. Right? It's not this one, it's not this one, it's this one, because I know that the numbers that come next are going to be east of this line, and the numbers that come after this are going to be north of that line. So the grid square is always the one to the northeast, right? So I found my axis where my 2 points cross, and my grid square that I'm interested in is the one to the northeast. All right, so my next numbers, I had 0334. My next numbers were 190 for my easting and 700 for my northing. So I'm going to take my plotter. And so there are several different style plotters. I'll show you some other styles in a minute. This one is the kind that I will have at the location. It's my preferred plotter, and I'll tell you why in a few minutes. First, I'm just going to show you how it's used. So 190, I need to go over 190. So you'll see, I'm going to try to So what I'm doing is 190 is right there, right? I'm going from 0 over 190. So there's my 9 hash marks over, or tick marks over from 1. So there's from 0 to 190. So I'm now 190 meters over east of this easting line, 0334190. Yep, great. Now, what was my northing? 4263700. Okay, so now without moving my plotter, and this is why I prefer this type of plotter. Once I've got that 190 locked in, I just hold that in place. Now I need to go up 700. So I'm just going to go right up here, 700. Right there. Right? So I'm 190 over. I'm 700 up. Right? And I've got my little point that I've plotted right there. And I say, wow, that looks like it's in a reentrant junction. I've got a big reentrant coming down here, a big reentrant coming down here. That looks like a reentrant junction to me. Sure enough, look, the clue I've been given is reentrant junction. So that makes me pretty confident that I've plotted that correctly. All right, let's do another one. So now I've got 0336 4262. So I go over 0336 4262. 4262. Okay, so 0336 4262. So that tells me I'm in this grid square right here. Get my little compass out of the way here. Pull my plotter over here. Oh, 0336 4262. Yep. Okay. 0336 what? 0336 010. 010. So that's just 10. That's a tiny little amount, right? 10 is just one little tick mark. So I'm going one little tick mark. That's barely over the grid line. Okay. And then 4262 what? 4262 100. Oh, 4262 100. Well, it just so happens I've actually already got a point there. I didn't even realize I'd selected that same point. But basically, if we were drawing this, we would put our point right there. And then we would draw our circle around that. I've already got one there. And I would say, that looks like a hilltop. And my teammate would say, yes, hilltop. That's exactly what it says. Perfect. And I would feel confident that I have plotted that correctly. All right, let's do one more. One last one. We've got 0333. That's this one right here. 0333. 4261. 4261 right here. All right. So that tells us we're in this grid square right here, right? Okay. So let's pull our plotter over to there. Oop. Got my plotter. Okay. Did you say 0333 4261? Yeah, 0333 4261. All right, I'm in the right square. 0333 what? 440. Okay, 440, 440, 440. And you say it over and over to yourself like that so that you don't mess it up. 440. All right, I'm on 440. Got it? 4261, 730. 730, 730, 730, 730 is 10, 20, 30, about right there. And that looks like a saddle. Maybe I didn't do it quite perfectly. Yeah, saddle. Awesome. So we're in a saddle. And that's how you plot UTM coordinates using this little style ruler right here. So any questions about that before I show you some different styles? There's really one major different style that you could have that you do quite a bit differently from this. So any questions before I show you some of the other styles?
You said there will be extra plotters, correct? You
right.
are an incredible teacher. I just want to put that out there. Excellent.
Thanks. I've got this little plotter right here. If you want one, so I just ordered 10 of them from Map Tools. They're like $4 each.
Yes, I will definitely buy one from you, please.
I will have some extras for sale
Right.
at the race for $4, and
Right.
I'll have like 3 of these at this point that you can borrow if you want. So they're tiny. They're so handy. So let me show you what they look like in real life. Yeah.
How cute.
Yeah, right. You pack down into your pack for nothing, which is why I put a little string on them. I put a piece of duct tape. I put 1 to 24 just so I know that's what scale I'm at. Sometimes I put like a little piece of flagging just so they're brighter in my pack, because that can be kind of hard to see. But yeah, so those are, if you're on a 1 to 24,000, it just doesn't get any easier. And this is as good a plotter in terms of accuracy as you'll get. And I'll show you why now. So here are some other styles. Okay. So there's the slot style. Some of you may have one of these. So a couple of things you'll note about this. If you have one of these bigger ones that has multiple scales on it. There we go. That has multiple scales on it. You'll see one of the things I've done. So this is a slot one, and what it means is there's a slot on that one side. So whereas my little triangle just stops at that side, because this one has more material, it puts a slot in there, and that's how you mark it. One of the things that's really tricky about this style that has all these different scales, it's also got, for example, a 1 to 25,000, which is very close to 1 to 24,000. And it can be super easy to like rotate it the wrong way and use the wrong scale. So that's why you'll see I put before whatever my last race was where I used this one. This is one that I would keep in the TA and not carry with me. Typically, I'll carry my little triangle in my pack if I'm going to have to plot in the field, or even if I'm not, if I've just plotted in the transition area and I'm not supposed to have to plot in the field, I still carry this. You know why? Because if I get out there and I'm having trouble finding a point and my first thought is, did I misplot it? There are ways you can plot without these, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But if you've got this little handy dandy plotter in your pack, you can pull that out and really quickly double check your plots to make sure that your plot was right. So I always carry that in my pack if I've had to plot either in the TA or in the field. But then in the TA, I keep this one around, and you'll see I put a piece of tape over the 1 to 25,000 scale, basically. So I would not inadvertently look at the 1 to 25,000 scale. Now, it should be obvious to you if you've inadvertently picked up the wrong scale, because when you lay it down in your grid square, it's not going to match up, right? The 1 to 25,000 is going to be a little bit longer, but it's also not so much different because those scales aren't that much different that it really jumps out at you. And so that's why I put my little duct tape over top of it so I can't inadvertently use the wrong one. And then I write 1 to 24 and put a little arrow to exactly where it is on my plotter so I don't get it wrong. So let me show you a couple of other styles of plotters.
Hello, Stephanie.
Yeah.
I have a question. Are there going to be checkpoints in the first squares, like the ones that are on the west, because they don't have like the 3, 3, 3, 2 or whatever, right? They the scale starts like in the second squares?
That's a really good question. In more advanced races, I have done that. And when you get a point like that, you basically have to sort of subtract and work back from the one that's to the east. I'm not doing that to you all. Like I said, this is all about learning to plot. It's not about testing your skill. So if I had done that, if I had given you, for example, 0332 710, say, then what you would have to do is say, okay, 710 over, I don't know where, oh, hang on, let me get it back while I'm doing this. If I had given you 0332 710 as your easting, right? You don't have 0332 line on here, but you could figure it out because you would subtract 710 from 1,000. That would tell you that it's got to be 290 back. So you would basically go 290 west from 0333. So that's a great question. You will not run into that issue in this race. In this race, every UTM you get you'll have the entire grid square on the map to plot from. So you won't have to do that little trick, but that's a great question.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, so a couple of other style plotters. All right, let me just pull this over here. Okay, so I've shown you my plotter triangle. Okay, so here's the one I want to show you. Can you still see that? No, hang on. There. Do you see the UTM corner rulers?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. So this is the main one that's a lot different from what I've just shown you. And the reason is you can see it's basically the reverse. It's flipped. And so it's kind of ironic because they specifically market this to adventure racers. And in fact, I have several of these. Lots of people have these. And the way you have to use that, let me see if I put it on my, did I create a stamp for that? Yeah, okay. So let me show you what you have to do to use that. Get this one out of the way. Okay. Here we go. Yeah, so if I've got 42, let's see, what we have 0333, 440, and 4261, 730, right? So I'm in this grid square, I've got to go over 440 and up 730. So with this style, where the point is to the northeast of your two axes coming together, what you've got to do is go over 440. Hang on, I'm just going to use this other square over here so it doesn't keep disappearing, because it doesn't matter which square we're in. So you've got to go over 440. So from this easting line right here in the middle, sorry, I can't point arrows and use my little stamp. I've got to go over 440. So I'm over 440, and now I've got to go up 730. So now you'll see, because it's reversed, because my point is at the northeast of these two axes coming together instead of the southeast, I can't just lay it on there and then go up 730 and plot my point. Instead, I've got to move my tool up. So now I've got it at 440 on my easting and 730 on my northing. When I get it at 730 on my northing, now I got to go back and go, okay, get it back on 440. And so you see how it ends up being kind of worky because you have to move it two directions. Whereas with the other kind, with this kind, once I laid it down, right, the point's down here instead of up here. Once I laid that down on my easting, then I just had to go up and put my point. So I don't have to move it again. Whereas with this one, where the point is on the northeast side, see, it's flipped. I get it on my easting, and then I have to move the whole scale, the whole plotter up until I get to my northing along this axis, right? And then my point is up there. So that's the reason I dislike this plotter. It's slower, and you've always got that sort of like, okay, in the process of moving it up to your northing, you almost always end up getting your easting off. So you get it on your northing, and then you have to go back and check your easting, and then did I move it off my northing? And so you feel like you're constantly doing this little having to adjust, and it's because you have to move it over and then up. Whereas with this style, you just lay it on the easting and then you count up to your northing. So,
And the other thing with the one you're showing us, the big square, how do you then mark it? There's
there's a little hole right there.
oh, there's a hole there. I
Yeah.
see the hole. I wasn't sure. So that's where you mark it. Okay.
Yeah, there's a little hole right there, and
I
you
see
mark
it.
it inside that little hole. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And so then
There they are.
the other style, so that's really the biggest difference, is if you've got one where your point is up on that northeast corner, you've got to move it east and then up north to get to your point. The other main style, oh, and I've got this one in here. The slot style, which is the one I was showing you on my big square one, that is this. There we go. So with the slot style, you'll see it's basically the same as my corner style, right? The difference is it's also got this protractor around here. And so because it gave you sort of this extra stuff around here, it couldn't just cut off this edge like it is over here. This is basically just this scale cut off at the edge, right? But it still wanted to give you the functionality that you get with this. And so what it did was it cut out this slot. That's cut out all the way down. And so you can still just lay it down. Let's say you've got 440 is your easting. So I'm going to put it on 440 right there. And now I can just go up to my northing, whatever it was, just like I did with the other one. And I put a point square in the middle. Now, and that's actually one of the things that I dislike about this. And the other reason I feel like this cheap little $4 thing is as good as it gets. That slot right there is 50 meters wide. If you look at it, and maybe you can see it better if I open it right here. Not really. Let's see. Here we go. Yeah, like look at that. If you look at the center line of where that slot is and you go over here, look, there's your 50 meter mark. So that's like 25 meters right there, and it goes the same distance the other way. In fact, I took my little plotter and laid it inside that slot, and I can tell you it's 50 meters wide. And so I always have this sort of sense of a little bit of uneasiness. It depends on what you're plotting, right? If you're just plotting a big hilltop and it's right in the middle of the hilltop, or, you know, a really distinct defined feature on the map, then, you know, it's going to be fine. You're going to be able to tell from your clue that you've got it plotted correctly. But if you're in some really fine detail features, you know, just know that it's basically the dead center of that line is your easting as you go up. So you've laid it down on your map. If, you know, 440 is your easting and 300 is your northing, then your point should be right in the center of the slot. So, you know, it's a pretty decent, if you bear that in mind and just know that it's right in the center, then it's a perfectly good tool. And what I use to plot are the Sharpie fine points, which are kind of fat anyway. So if you take that and you put a dot right in that slot, it's going to pretty much go right in the middle anyway, because it isn't a fine enough point to, you know, break down in between that little slot space anyway. So that's those are the main styles. You know, really everything else is just a version of, you know, is it a style where the corner is to the southeast, or is it a style where the corner is to the northeast? That's really, everything's just a version of those two types. And so it's a question of, am I going to have to move my plotter over and up, or do I get to just lay it down and then find where I am along that axis? And if it's that style, then it's either going to be open on that side or you're going to have a slot. So that's plotting. And then what I will have at that checkpoint, so this would be how to read with one of the tools that you have to move over and up. So I'll have one of those there in case you take that kind of tool with you. And then I'll have another illustration like this. So this is basically, you know, what I've just shown you using the little triangle or the slot tool. It's basically the same thing. And so what you'll have at the TA will look something like this. There'll be some little instructions, and then there will be a little illustration like this that says, you know, this would be an easting of 0461 130, and the northing would be whatever the scale is over there. Well, they don't have it drawn in, so you don't know, but it'll be something along those lines, some directions with an illustration like that. Okay. Any questions about plotting UTM coordinates? Okay. So let me just one more. I always like to think about sort of dummy checks, especially because so often in races, our brains are working at, you know, half capacity or whatever. Your dummy check for plotting UTMs is going to be, your dummy check is going to be this. If my coordinate is 600, and I plot the point, and I'm talking about my easting now, the first one. If this easting number, the last three digits are 600, and I look down and I've plotted this point right here.
Stephanie, do you want to share your screen again?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I do. Okay. So my easting, my three digits are 600. And I get my easting, I get my northing, I plot it, and my point is right here. Each one of you now should be able to look down at that point and say, you had to have plotted that wrong, because if your easting is 600, that tells me that you are 60% of the way across that grid square going east, right? 600 out of 1,000 meters, that's 60% of the way across. That's not 60% of the way across. That looks more like an easting of 300 or 350 or something like that, right? So maybe what I did was I inadvertently put my northing here and my easting here. That's one of the more common mistakes that you'll make, is using your northing on this axis and your easting on the other axis. And so your dummy check is, that's about 50% of the way on the easting. Sorry, it's not straight. That's about 50% of the way on the northing, right? So I know that if my easting is less than 500, I better be somewhere left of this line. If my easting is more than 500, and I'm talking about these last three digits, right? Then I better be somewhere in this eastern half. Same thing with my northing. With the northing of 700, I can eyeball it and tell you, well, that's going to be 750, right? That's going to be 250 if I want to do quarters, right? I can just sort of eyeball quarters and know that if you gave me an easting of 750 and a northing of 750, I'm going to be somewhere around here. If you gave me an easting of 250 and a northing of 500, I'm going to be somewhere around here. I'm going to be about halfway north and about a quarter of the way east, right? And so even without a plotter, you can get within, 50 meters, right? Because you can just sort of guesstimate how far over 250 is. The other thing you could do if you didn't have a plotter is use your scale down here. So you've got this graphical scale. Since we know that all that plotter is breaking down that 1 kilometer grid square into smaller pieces, you can use this scale to do the very same thing. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's 1 kilometer right there. It tells me that over here, right? This is my kilometer scale. This is my mile scale. So that's 1 kilometer. So basically that gets me within 100 meters. I know that each one of these is 100 meters. So I could create my own scale with a little note card or a sheet of paper just by drawing these little tick marks on there. And I know each one of those is 100 meters. And then I can break it down, and that's 50 meters. And I break it down again as 25 meters, right? So you could make your own plotter if you needed to. If you lost yours or you're in an emergency, you make your own plotter. A plotter is simply a scale that's breaking that down into 10-meter increments. Okay. Somebody put a link for some good markers, a preferred writing utensil for marking points. Yes, I've not used the Statler markers, but I've heard people talk about those and they're good. I just use Sharpies. I use a red fine point Sharpie and that works pretty well. Yeah. Okay, any other questions about UTMs before we move on to bearings? All right, so some of the points that you get to, you'll be navigating to a known point, and when you get to that point, it's going to have a bearing on it and a distance. And so there are two ways you could approach that. If you've got a bearing of 90 degrees and a distance of 200 meters, then you can take your compass out and you can start walking due east and pace count for 200 meters and see where you end up. And for a short enough distance, like 200 meters, that's pretty short. For a short enough distance and over terrain that's pretty open and not, creating a lot of problems, that can work just fine. What it is pretty slow, right? Because you're picking out an object in the distance, walking to that, picking out another object, walking to that. So it's kind of slow going, and it doesn't allow you to select an ideal route between here and there, right? You're just following that straight line route for 200 meters. So whatever objects are in your way, you got to get over them, right? So here's my pro tip for the day. The other way to do it, if you've got a known point on your map and I give you a bearing and distance, then you can use your compass on your map, use your compass as a protractor to figure out where that point is on the map. And then you've just got another point on your map that you can navigate to, right? And you can select whatever route you want. So, for example, back to our screen here. And this is why I had this point plotted on here, circled on here. So let's say you're at this, we've called this CPA right here. You're at CPA and it's right on that easting line, which I did on purpose. And you get a bearing of 90 degrees and 800 meters. Well, I mean, you can look at that immediately and see 90 degrees. Okay, I can I don't need a compass to tell me what 90 degrees is. 90 degrees is going to look like that, right? 90 degrees is due east, and there's my grid line, that's my east line. So 90 degrees is that way. And what I say, 800 meters? Well, I can tell you 800 meters is going to be something like that-ish. Yeah. So needless to say, I don't want to just take my compass out and follow a bearing 90 degrees for 800 meters from that point, because that's going to involve a swim. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my compass to figure out, and like I said, if it's 90 degrees, that's easy enough, right? I don't really even need my compass to figure out 90 degrees. But when we get to other less obvious ones, I'm going to need my compass, and we'll talk about that. We'll show you that in a minute. But what I'm going to do then is just go, I'm going to use my little plotter, which is what? A scale. It's a ruler, right? That's all it is. It's a ruler. So I'm going to lay my plotter down on my map to help me figure out 800 meters. And then I'm going to oh, it's really big. I have it. Not the right size now. Yeah, pretty close. So I'm going to lay my plotter down on my map to help me find 800 meters really quickly. And then I'm going to go due east. And I'm going to plot that point right there. And then I'm just going to navigate to that point by dropping down to the trail, whatever. However you want to navigate to it at that point. I'm just going to navigate to a point on a map. That's the point. And so if I've got something that's trickier than 90 degrees, how do I do that? Well, that's where I'm going to use my compass as a protractor. So let me see, I think I've got some illustrations of this. Here we go. So let's talk about compass parts really quickly so that you know the language I'm using. Index line, that's an important one. The index line is where you read your bearing from. So if I give you a bearing of, in this case, 8 degrees, this compass bezel has been turned just a little bit so that it's at 8 degrees. And it's where that index line is that you read those degrees. So when you turn this bezel, you're going to turn it until you get to the number. So if it's 60 degrees, I'm going to turn this bezel until that little 60 degrees is right there at that index line. So you always read your bearing at the index line. So that's an important one to know, index line. So that's what I'm going to do to set my bearing on my compass. And then to draw the bearing line or to find the bearing line on my map, I've got to lay my compass on my map. And then I've got to line up my orienting lines with the north lines on my map. So the next thing I want you to know is what orienting lines are. These lines inside your compass housing, those lines are your orienting lines, right? They never move relative to this housing. Anytime you move this bezel, those orienting lines are moving with it. So you're going to set your bearing here at the index line, and then you're going to lay your compass down so that these orienting lines match up with the north lines on your map. Those are the two main definitions I want you to know, parts that I want you to be able to identify. So this is just an illustration. When we say protractor, we mean a device that we're going to use to find an angle, right? So in this case, we've got north, and we're using it to find a bearing of 70 degrees. So we've set, in this case, those little tick marks are 2 degrees. Each one is 2 degrees. So in this case, they've set their compass to 64 degrees. And then see the orienting lines are aligned with the north lines on the map. So those orienting lines inside the compass, they've lined up with the north lines on the map. They've got their bearing set right here at their index line. So that's the index line. They turned their bezel until it was set to 64 degrees. And then they just laid the entire compass down. So once you set your bearing in there, you put your bearing at the index line and then you leave it. And then you just lay the entire compass down and turn the entire compass, the entire base plate, until those lines inside are lined up with the orienting lines. The orienting lines inside the compass are lined up with the north lines on the map. And make sure that your north arrow inside your compass, the orienting arrow it's called, not the north arrow, the magnetic north, the red needle. We don't care about the needle right now. Ignore the needle for what we're doing right now. All we're doing right now is creating an angle on our map. And so the needle doesn't matter. The needle doesn't matter until you start doing something in the real world, right? So right now, all we care about is this little, the orienting arrow is that little, when we talk about putting Fred in the shed, Fred is your compass needle. This is the shed right here, the orienting arrow. So the reason that's important is if you don't make sure you've got, if you don't make sure that you've got your orienting arrow facing north, then you could be going exactly 180 degrees the wrong way, right? So hang on. Yeah. So you need to make sure your orienting lines are lined up with the north lines on the map, and that your orienting arrow, not the needle, the arrow north is facing north. In other words, make sure that that north arrow is not pointing that way, because if so, you've got it going exactly 180 degrees the wrong way. So we've got our bearing set at the index line. We've laid our entire compass down so that the orienting lines are lined up. And now what that does, we've got this edge of our compass is parallel to this direction of travel arrow. So where our bearing line is, that index line, it lines up with our direction of travel arrow right here, right? And this is parallel to that. And so what we're going to do is take this edge and we're going to lay that over our known point. And so let me see if my next image does that. Yeah. Okay. So now, and we'll do this again when we pull up our Greenbow map again. Their known point, I guess, was supposed to be this house right here. So what they've done, and what we'll do is our known point will be down here because we're trying to figure out our bearing from the known point forward. What they're doing is they're taking what's called a back bearing. They're taking the known point here and going back from there. What we're going to do is we're going to put our known point here and we're going to lay the edge of our compass down so that this edge goes directly through our known point. And then we've got a line from that known point out that follows that bearing. So that's our bearing line or our azimuth. People also call a bearing an azimuth. So that's an azimuth line. And all that's done now is created an angle. Remember when we talked about the compass being a protractor, we've created an angle right here between north and our bearing line. So that is a 64-degree angle, right? If we did it due east, that'd be a 90-degree angle. If we went due south, that'd be a 180-degree angle. If we went due west, it'd be a 270-degree angle. Due north is 0 or 360. So that's all we've done. We've used our compass to help us create an angle on the map that is a 68-degree or 64-degree, whatever it was, angle, right? And now we're going to line that bearing line up with our known point, because then as we leave our known point going on that bearing, that's going to take us to whatever our destination is. So unfortunately, I never did figure out how I could get this whole thing to like rotate the way I really wanted it to do. So I'm not going to be able to be that fancy, but let's take just a couple. I can't find where I put my little, I had some bearings and distances that I was going to do. I wonder where I put those. Oh, I know, they're on my map here. Okay. So let's say we wanted to do, let's say we get to this point that's circled here on our map. And what we get is a bearing of 316 degrees and a distance of 930 meters. And our clue is saddle. So what I would do is I would rotate this bezel on my compass to 316 degrees. And if you printed out your map and you've got a compass with you, you can practice this right there. So you should rotate the bezel on your compass until it's 316 degrees at the index line. 1416, right? So my index line right here, I've got set to 316 degrees, right? Now I'm going to take my entire compass, the base plate, without moving that bezel again, and I'm going to lay it on my map so that my orienting lines inside my compass are matched up to my north lines on my map. Right? And I'm going to have the edge of my compass going through right through the center of my circle. So let me do a stop share real quick, just so you can see my live stuff better. So if I put it on 316 degrees, I line my orienting lines up with my grid lines on my map, and I have the edge of my compass running right through the center of my circle. It should look like this. All right. Now I can draw a line along that edge of my compass where my point is. And along that line somewhere is going to be the saddle I'm looking for. Where along that line? Well, what I tell you, 930 meters from my point. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my line on here. Right, I just drew my line. So that's a bearing line that is 316 degrees from that known point on the map. And now I can take my handy dandy little ruler and I go from the center of my circle along that line, 900 meters. And I end up with a point that is at a saddle. So that's really encouraging. Right? See my black circle there. So my pink circle is where we started. That's a 316-degree bearing line. I took my plotter and just laid it out and said 900 meters from the center of my circle gets me to that point right there. That's a saddle. Great. And so now, instead of having to sit here and stare at my compass for 900 meters while I try to get to that saddle, which was right here. Right now I can pick whatever route I want and I can find the most efficient route. So now, instead of trying to drop down this super steep slope right here, I'm just going to bomb down this and pick up this trail and take the trail around. And now I can decide, do I want to go up this thing? Do I want to maybe go up this water course and up the reentrant? Do I want to stay on the trail and go around? You know, I've got choices. This looks super steep. I don't want to do that. But now I've got choices for how I can get to that saddle, right? Instead of trying to just follow a bearing along that line. So I've plotted my bearing and distance, and that gives me choices. And now I can navigate much more efficiently to that. Let's do one more. Let's do from our point 108 degrees for 800 meters. And the clue is hilltop. So 108 degrees. I'm going to set in my compass. So I'm rotating my bezel around until I get to 108 degrees. Right, 108 degrees at my index line right there. And now I'm going to lay my compass down so that my orienting lines are lined up with my north lines on the map. And then I'm going to slide my compass up until the edge of my compass is going right through my known point. Where am I? Okay. And now I'm going to draw a line along the edge of my compass. All right, so now I've got a second bearing line from my known point. And that bearing line is, what did I say, 108 degrees, right? So 108 degrees, and what did I say, 800 meters. So I'm going to take my scale, my plotter, and I'm going to go lay it down at 800 meters at my known point. And I've got a dot. It's a hilltop. My clue was hilltop. Everything is just working magically this race. And now I've plotted my hilltop. And this is a great illustration of how plotting your bearing is sometimes super critical, because we can all see that if I just set off from this point, following a bearing, there's my hilltop that I plotted it to. If I just set off following a bearing for 800 meters, I would end up having to swim, right? So now I'm plotting my point, and I'm going to trek and go around and take a much more efficient route. You know, and certainly either of those, even if you hadn't seen that it was going to cross an arm of the lake, you know, 800 meters, 930 meters, even if you're just going cross country and not having to cross a lake, you know, that's a long time to be following a bearing, right? That's a long leg, and that's going to be super slow trying to watch your compass the whole time. So that's why knowing how to plot your bearing and distance on your map can be super efficient. And now for what where you're gonna get these in the race, you know, you may be able to eyeball it. Sometimes you can just kind of eyeball things, and between that and sort of taking a bearing, you may do sort of a combination of those things. But I suggest you know how to do this so that at least you can, you can eyeball it on your map. And like I said, well, you'll see when you get there. There are some of them where you may be able to just hold your compass up, look at your bearing and go. But there may be some where you'll be glad that you know how to do this. So it's a good skill to have and a good skill to practice. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Any questions?
Stephanie, are we going to have to account for declination at all?
That's a great question. So the bearings that I give you are going to be bearings based on grid north. And the reason is because the grid lines on your map are grid north, and I want to make it super simple for you all to be able to do what I've just shown you how to do. So I'm going to give you a bearing that's based on the grid lines on your map, which means if you plot them on your map, then they're going to be accurate. And then you're just going to navigate to that on your map. And if you use your compass to navigate in the real world, then you will need to use, well, you'll need to account for magnetic declination if you want to be super accurate. So the magnetic declination in this area off of grid north, which are the grid lines on your map, is -6 degrees. So it's a 6-degree westerly declination. The only time that that's going to matter to you is if you set a bearing in your compass and want to follow that bearing out in the real world, right? So for example, if you get to one of these points that has a bearing and distance on it, and the bearing is 90 degrees, and you decide you're not going to mess with taking the time to plot it, it's wide open, you just are going to look at 90 degrees and go. Well, depending on how far it is, you could just kind of ignore the declination and figure I don't have to be super precise as long as it's not real far. With magnetic declination, for every 1 degree, let's see, all right, for every 1 degree that you're off, it's 90 feet per mile. So, if you're going a short enough distance, something like 6 degrees of declination is not a huge deal. And if what you're looking for is a big enough feature, then you can probably ignore it for, again, for a short enough distance. But if you want to be super precise, or if you just want to practice and get good at accounting for declination, then what you do is you need to either set your compass for magnetic declination. Now, the thing is, if you set your compass, if you set your compass for magnetic declination, then you need to be sure and set it based on the grid north line. So the way CalTopo does this map, it's got it, you'll see 7 degrees westerly declination off of true north. Hang on, you can't see it on what I've got there.
We could see it on the paper.
Yeah, hang on. Okay. What they show you here is the declination from true north. This is true north, not grid north. The lines on this map are grid north. You'll see those lines are not absolutely parallel, right? To the side of the map. If you get up here, see, you can see that is not true north, because true north is straight up and down. True north is the edge of this map. So this declination figure from true north, okay, well, if what you're doing is taking a bearing using these grid lines, that's a grid north bearing. So if you're going to set your compass for magnetic declination, you want it to be from grid north, which is, for this map, grid north is 1 degrees west of true north, which means that magnetic north is 6 degrees west of grid north. So if you're going to set, if you've got a compass where you can automatically set your declination, then you need to set it to a 6 degree westerly declination. And then it will be, your compass will be adjusted to this grid north line, which is what you would be using to take any bearings off your map, right? You're not going to use true north to take a bearing off your map because you don't have true north lines. You've got grid north lines. So what you want to do is adjust your compass based on the difference between grid north and magnetic north. And the difference between grid north and magnetic north on this map is 6 degrees. Does that make sense? The only time that magnetic declination matters to you is when you're using your compass to navigate to something in the woods, right? And the reason it matters, this will maybe help you because I know magnetic declination is something that really messes with people's heads. So what's happening with magnetic declination, the line of magnetic declination is like somewhere in the center of the US, like around Kansas. And so if you're here in Kentucky, your compass needle, instead of pointing to true north, there's this big force over in Kansas that's pulling your compass needle and making it point 7 degrees that way. And so if you want to go from this point right here to this point right here, and it's exactly due north by this grid line, and you get your compass out and you follow that red needle on your compass because you know that that's due north, you're going to end up over here, right? And you're going to be 6 degrees off over a distance of, I don't know, whatever it is, right? So that's the reason that you adjust for declination, because your compass needle thinks north is this way, whereas on your map, north is this way. And so because it's trying to, that magnetic force is pulling your needle to the west, we have a westerly declination in Kentucky because that magnetic pull is in Kansas. That's the easiest way. They've got all these different mnemonics and things for add and subtract and do this and do that. I can't remember things like that. So for me, the easiest way is to visualize. I'm in Kentucky. The magnetic pull is in Kansas. I know it's that way. It's westerly. It's trying to pull my compass to, it is pulling my compass needle to the west. So that's a westerly declination. And what that means is it's subtracting, right? It's a negative 6 degrees off this grid line. So what I've got to do to account for that, if I've got an automatic adjustment on my compass, then I'll just adjust it to 6 degrees westerly declination. If you've got an automatic adjustment on your compass, you'll see that it says, well, you're not going to be able to see that, west declination and east declination. So you would set that, you set it by using this little tool on your lanyard. If you've not done this before, this little silver thing on the lanyard of your compass is a little pointy thing. And the purpose of that little pointy thing is to go into this little slot in the back of your compass. There's a little slot in there, and that little tool fits right down in that slot like a screwdriver, and you can twist it. And as you twist it, you'll see that orienting arrow, the shed, moves as you twist it. And so you'll twist that until the little line is on 6 degrees west declination for this area, and it's adjusted. So if you don't have a compass that automatically adjusts, then the way you adjust for declination, if it's a 6-degree westerly declination like we have here, is you're going to add 6 degrees to whatever your bearing is. So again, this doesn't matter for drawing the bearings and doing the stuff on the map like we talked about. The only time it matters is when you're using your compass to navigate to a point. So if I give you a bearing of 0 degrees or 360 degrees, then you're going to have to add, if you just use your compass to navigate to that, then you're going to have to add 6 degrees to that in order to get to the right spot, right? Because your compass needle is going to take you there. But where you want to go is there. And so what you have to do is go 6 degrees instead of 0 degrees in order to correct for that, your compass trying to pull you that way. You have to get it, instead of 0, you go 6. So you trick your compass into getting you the right way. Does that help?
Do you
I wasn't going
recommend,
to talk about magnetic declination. I know it's confusing.
but you said we don't need it for what we are doing. Do you think that's going to be an issue?
The distances that you're going to be going using your compass in this race are small enough that it's not going to make a big difference. The
And-
features that you're looking for are significant features.
Okay.
It's not going to be a big deal. If you don't correct for declination, you're still going to be just fine.
I'm finding while we were doing your little thing though, I was using my thumb compass as opposed to, now there's an issue, there's a difference, isn't there?
Yeah, so a thumb compass, you're not going to be able to use to draw a bearing line on your map.
Okay.
Because you don't have this base plate. I mean, you could, it's just going to be a lot more, it's going to be a lot more complicated. Yeah, you really, to draw bearings and to use your compass like a protractor, you really want a base plate compass. And I have several of these. If you need to borrow one, I can bring some base plate compasses for you to borrow. Yeah, thumb compasses are great for orienteering. Some people use them in adventure racing. I personally don't like to use them just because you're doing so many other things with your hands. You know, you're paddling, you're biking, all these things, having a thumb compass on, it gets in the way and I worry I'm going to lose it. And, you're also not navigating at the sorts of speeds and trying to reorient as frequently as you do in orienteering. So they're great for orienteering, but just less critical, and they kind of get in the way for adventure races. So little base plate compass. I've used this Sunto M3, M2. I've bought this same compass so many times. This is the M3, I think. Sunto base plate compass. It's pretty bomb proof. It's a great compass. What's crappy is all your scales along the edge get faded out. And so that's the downside to it. But if you've got your little plotter, that's a great little scale anyway. You use the leaning shed method. Don't do any math. Yeah, I don't know what the leaning shed method is, but it sounds good. It sounds visual, which I really like.
I'm happy to expand on that if you'd like.
Sure.
So instead of, you're not trying to adjust your bearing so that the needle is in the shed. You're just accepting that your magnetic needle is going to be outside of the shed. So you're just replicating what the magnetic declination is that you see on your map on your compass. And you're still following the heading or the bearing that you set, but you're intentionally making sure that that magnetic needle is offset a little bit. So you're just replicating your map on your compass and you're just following the heading of the shed.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. As long as you make sure that you have your needle on the right side of the shed. right?
that's why I like that visual of double checking the map, because then the
Yeah.
true north is, the star, and then the MN, magnetic north, that's what your needle is pointing towards. So that's the quick double check for me when I'm pretty sleepy.
Yeah, nice. No, I like that. Yeah, I get it. I like it. All right, any other questions about UTMs or plotting a bearing, following a bearing, questions about the race? Other questions about the race?
Stephanie, what was the compass you said that you used again? The
Suunto, SUUNTO M3, M as in Mary 3. Oh, and I was going to show you, if you want to get your own map tool, let's see. Oh, I've got a couple of things to show you. Because I also, if you want some extra practice or instruction on plotting UTMs, 361 Adventures has a great little page, 361adventures.com, how to plot UTM points. If you just go to their website, this was probably in their blog, so you would need to like search their blog or something, but it's a pretty good little tutorial right there. So you can see though that they do use this other style. So if you've got that style, it's a good tutorial for that. But it's the corner style rather than the one that I showed you. But that's a pretty good little tutorial for that style. I wanted to point out. Mark Latanzi's book, Squiggly Lines, also reviews plotting UTMs and a ton of other stuff. It's like the Bible of navigation for AR. So everyone should have that book. And then maptools.com. So map tools, you'll find all these different types of plotters that we've talked about. If you go under products, plotters, you'll see there's slot style tools. That's that kind that I showed you. And then the little triangle tools, it took me a minute to find where those were. It was on, oh, here we go. Mini corner style tools. That's what it is. Mini corner style tools. And you can see there's 24, 25. Someone said they had never seen having to plot other than 24,000. The one race where you have to plot other than 24,000 routinely around here is the Mission. He always uses 1 to 25,000 for whatever reason. Well, you get a little more on the map, I guess. But that's one to watch out for. But yeah, here's the little 1 to 24,000, and see they were like $336 plus shipping. So I just ordered 10 of them. They're being delivered to the race, or to here. I'll have them at the race. I'll have several to sell, and then there we go. There's a nice little reminder as well for how to plot.
As far as on the race, is there going to be one transition area or two?
So there will be more than one transition area, but sort of one main one that you'll go in and out of a few times.
I'm just where we're new at this, trying to figure out like how we'll leave stuff where. Is that just something we'll get more information on as far as planning that the day of, I guess, and be able to.
Yeah, no, I don't mind giving you more information about that. So your main transition area will be at the start finish at the amphitheater. And so that's where you'll sort of want to have, set up camp, so to speak. And, I suggest having a cooler with lots of cool drinks and some cold fruit and, assuming that it's going to be hot. Have plenty of stuff to keep you cooled off there in your main transition area, and you'll come in and out of there several times. And then the only other transition area is going to be over at the marina, the boat ramp, and that is going to be obviously your transition for the paddle. And so you will be able to stage your own paddling gear there the morning before the race, if you have your own paddling gear. So you won't have to carry any of that. If you've got a third seat, your own paddles, PFDs, any of that, you can stage over there. You can stage some hydration and food there if you want to, but it's going to come early in the race. So there's really not, well, I guess there is kind of a point in doing it between the start and whatever you have to do to get there, you wouldn't have to carry it. But anything that you stage at the paddling TA, you will need to take with you when you leave there in the boats. So you can stage whatever you want at that put in, the paddling TA, but you have to take it with you when you leave there. So just know that. And
So basically you're starting the paddling, but not pulling the canoes out in the same place, maybe? Is that what you're saying?
well, I just don't want everything there. I don't want people leaving
Okay.
stuff there
Gotcha.
that would basically be either litter or stuff we would have to watch while you're on the paddle.
Mm.
That's
Okay, gotcha. And then once you finish the paddling, like you don't go back, right? Once you finish the biking, you don't go back to biking. You move on to the next leg, right?
Yeah, well, once you've finished a leg, you're done with that leg. You can't go back to the points of that leg. But you will be changing up disciplines a few different times during the race.
Can you give us like the estimated like distances for each kind of thing? So like for trekking, biking, paddling, what we can expect for distances if we actually are looking to clear the course?
You know what? I don't have those down right now. I know the times, and I just had it vetted last week, and the vetter cleared the course in about 6.5 hours. So I expect the top teams to clear the course. So I haven't measured out precise distances since I made some adjustments before he vetted that. So I'll do that. I'll get that out to you in terms of minimum distance to get all the prime points and then distance to clear the course. I'll wheel that out and I'll put that information out there.
Maybe I missed this before. As far as when nature calls out on the course, there's not like a trowel or a shovel required. So especially for bowel movements, what's kind of the expected thing we do? I'm guessing we carry our own toilet paper in and out, but what about other waste management and commentary on all that?
Yeah, so if you need to have a bowel movement while you're out in the woods, then you need to dig some kind of hole, and whether you use a stick to do that or, if you want to carry a trowel, honestly, I never have bowel movements after I leave home, so I don't think about it a whole lot. But yeah, if you think that's likely to happen, then you might want to carry one of the little small camping trowels. Otherwise, my suggestion would be to get either a rock or a stick and dig a hole. I always carry, as the one thing I do, I urinate a lot, hopefully when I'm hydrated. And most of the time I just shake it off, but every once in a while it's really nice to be able to wipe. And so I always have a Ziploc baggie, one of the snack size baggies with toilet paper and wet wipes, and then a second Ziploc baggie that I use to put trash in. And that's what I carry. But yeah, I would suggest a rock or a stick in order to dig a hole, reasonable sized hole to be able to bury any waste.
With the paddling portion, I know paddles are being provided. They are the single, not the double, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're renting a canoe and using the rental paddles, those will be canoe paddles. If you're
So do we
bringing
have to
your
do
own,
that-
you're welcome to bring kayak paddles.
Do we need to do that ahead of time, or you're providing all that ahead?
Yeah, they'll just be there at the put in for you.
But that is included, like we don't have to actually rent.
No, those are all included.
Okay.
We'll have a paddle and a PFD for every racer.
Okay. I have a completely separate thing. Your shirt is fabulous.
Thanks.
Where did you get that?
Well, I had them made and I'm giving them away. These are the shirts that are being given away through the Women of AR group every week. So
Uh-huh.
if you're in the group and you know, every week I post a topic and everyone who comments on that gets their name. I print all those comments out and they get their name put in the little drawing bucket there, my little bowl. And I draw a name out each week and I mail a shirt out to the winner.
That's very exciting. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. This week's topic is compasses. It was inspired by our little session tonight. So I just did the drawing right before we came on here. I do the drawing every Sunday at 8, and then I announce what the topic is for the following week. And you've got until Saturday at midnight to like and comment on that post about that topic. And so you can post a question, you can post a piece of advice, whatever, but it's been a really great way to exchange information in the Women of AR group. And then on Sunday night, I do a Facebook Live where I talk about whatever's on my mind for a couple of minutes and then do a drawing for that week and then announce the topic for the next week. So this week's topic is compasses.
Now, on the mountain bike, one of my teammates was concerned that we were all going to die on the mountain bike. It's not like a technical, I think somebody had mentioned that it was kind of more multi-use, not single track. Is that accurate?
Well, they are multi-use trails. They are single track. I mean, they're pretty wide single track. They're not like super narrow trails. You know, some of them, I suppose some of them you might even call double track, but you know, they're mountain biking trails, and they're also horse trails. They're much, much nicer than if you did the race last year at Carter Caves. The horse trails at Carter Caves are wet, mucky, and horrible. The trails here at Greenbow are a lot nicer. There is, and I'll tell you this, when you get your maps that morning, there's one section of the trails that is just super flowy and fun. And, you know, it's not too rooty. It's not very rocky. And, you know, these trails are pretty fun. There is one stretch of trail that is slower, mainly because it's got all of these like short but steep little hills. And so it just takes you longer than you think it's going to take. And I will tell you where that is and sort of talk about what to expect out there when I give you the maps that morning that have the points on them, mainly because I want you to be able to make good choices in terms of time management. I don't want you to go on this one section of trail that are super fast and flowy and all of that and think, okay, we're making great time, and then not give yourself enough time on the other trail, which just seems to take longer for some reason. But none of these trails are, you know, what I would consider like advanced, super technical. You know, there are a few places where there's some kind of steep downhills. And so some places where if you're a little unsure or, you know, newer in your skills, you might want to get off and walk the downhills. You're going to have to walk some uphills just because some of them are steep and, you know, but none of them are super long, other than once you get on the ridge top, right? You've got to get to the ridge top, and that's a climb. But once you get on the ridge top here, you know, there aren't any big climbs, and a lot of it is super flowy. So none of you should be worried about dying on the mountain bike. Your lungs are going to hurt. You know, if you haven't been biking a lot, then, you know, your lungs are going to hurt. You're going to be out of breath, and it's going to be painful if you've got teammates who are a lot faster than you are, and you need to just tell them from the get-go, look, if you all take off and leave me and burn out my lungs and my legs, you know, 10 minutes into this bike ride, it's going to be just so unhappy for all of us. So let's moderate our pace out of the gate, not get too excited, you know, slow and steady wins the race sort of attitude, and you're all going to be fine.
So speaking of that too, you had a gear post where you talked about a tow rope. Is that literally what it sounds like? Like you connect one person to the other and the first person like is helping them along? Okay.
Yeah, it's exactly what it sounds like. You know, and so there's one part of this race where having a tow rope for the trek would make a lot of sense. For the biking in this race, you're not really, there's a little bit, you know, there's a little bit you're going to be on road, and you know, you got to climb up and over that ridge between the start finish and all the trails, right? There's a big ridge and that's a climb. So that would be one place on the road right there with that climb where a tow rope would really be helpful. But other than that, you know, you're mostly biking on trails in this race, and trying to tow on trails is not super, I don't advise that. That's not very practical. Towing for biking is good on pavement and pretty good on gravel, but not any good on trails. So, you know, towing for this race, you're going to have limited opportunities where towing is going to be helpful. So if you haven't gotten a tow system down, or you're just meeting your teammates there for the first time and you can't tow, you know, that's not going to be super critical in this race. Anything else? All right. I got nothing else for you. If I get any more questions, feel free to email me. If you think of something after we hang up here, feel free to email me. Any questions that I get over the next couple of weeks, you know, I'll be sure to post on our Facebook page. So make sure that you like the Unbridled Women Facebook page to get any updates. So I'll, you know, questions that are more general that I think all racers would want to know or know the answer to, I'll be sure and put that out there so that everybody's getting the same information. You're welcome, everybody. And good luck. It's going to be fun. I'm excited to see you all.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Okay, and I'll post this video up to the website and also to Facebook. So if you have some teammates who weren't able to sit in with us, they can watch it sometime in the next couple of weeks. So, all right, Rachel, I wish you could be here too. We'll see you again soon, I hope. Okay, good night, everybody.
Right.
Right.